I find strange things in the homes of the deceased. Submitted by Witchy Snake. When people die, you ever wonder what happens to all the useless stuff they have? Yeah, family heirlooms are nice to have, but who wants grandma's collection of decorative candles, or grandpa's old, rusty gardening tools? That's where I come in. I help run estate sales. My job is to go through all the stuff the family of the deceased doesn't want and sell it. Anything we don't sell gets donated to charity. We go in, and we empty the entire house so that it's ready to go on the market. We also do work for people who are downsizing. But that's not where the interesting stuff happens. I first got this job when I was 41 years old, when my husband and I got divorced. I was out of work at the time and had just moved back to my home state. A family friend offered to let me help her run these estate sales. I've been in the business for 3 years, and let me tell you, a lot of weird shit happens behind the scenes that nobody talks about. You see, how much we get paid depends on how much we sell, so the more expensive the items left, the more money we'll make. I remember, during my first sale, I found what looked to be some old, Native American artifacts in the back of a kitchen cupboard. I was excited, because they looked like they could be worth something. Usually, items like that weren't, but it's always exciting to find something other than porcelain dish sets and spoon collections. I went to show Sammy the glass bead jewelry and small pot, and she sternly asked me where I had found them. I was a little surprised, because she was usually so chipper, if not a bit stressed, and I didn't understand why she would be upset about this. I told her, and she immediately snatched the items from my hands and took them back to the cupboard. "Some things just need to stay in the house," she said. Now, here's the thing you should know about Sammy. She's been a friend of my family for years. She's a lanky butch who can talk your ear off. Usually, I have to actively try to end a conversation with her, and most of the time, it takes me a few minutes to do it. She can't keep a secret to save her life, but this time she would not give me any more of an explanation, no matter how hard I pressed. She would just wave a hand and say, "You'll understand when you've been at this job for a while." I was confused, and frankly a little off-put at the time, but I soon came to understand why Sammy gave me that answer. Sometimes, you can't talk to someone about something unless they've experienced it themselves. Sometimes, you have to say things like, "You know what I mean," without ever explaining what you mean. Sometimes, you have to understand that you will never understand. One time we were cleaning out the house of an old widow who was confined to a wheelchair. As usual, the family already took what they wanted to keep out of the house and didn't know what to do with the rest of the stuff. Sammy and I were walking around and taking inventory when we came across a really rare find. There was a grand piano sitting against the back wall in the basement. It was fully functional and everything. Sammy and I checked it several times to make sure it wasn't too good to be true. Something that expensive was usually scooped up by the family immediately. It was a huge find and would sell for more than we usually sold an entire house's worth of stuff for. We were practically jumping for joy. Sammy immediately went online and began researching the brand and how much it would sell for. Having never played a grand piano before, I decided to stay and dick around with it for a few minutes. I was in the middle of jamming out to Hot Cross Buns when I noticed a weird crack in the wall behind the piano. It was strange, like a trick of the light. It only became really noticeable when you were sitting down at the piano bench, but after I noticed it, I could not see it. The crack was straight, too straight to have formed naturally. I noticed another crack parallel to it a few feet away and realized that I was looking at a door. It was painted the exact same ugly, dark green as the wall. There was no doorknob that I could see. For some reason, the door blended in nicely. I called Sammy and pointed it out to her. We were both a little weirded out. I mean, who just paints a knobless door the same color as the wall and hides it behind a piano? I mentioned that it could just be a room that the woman couldn't access properly with her wheelchair, and Sammy hastily accepted that as fact. We figured we would try to move the piano and open the door, see if there's anything in there we could sell. Unfortunately, the piano wasn't on wheels, and we're two middle-aged ladies who hadn't hit the gym in a while, so we had to leave it be. The piano sold quickly because we were selling it for cheap. We usually sell our items for half of their going price. The day after the sale, a few days after we noticed the door, the movers came to take the piano away. I was burning with curiosity, and I'm sure the movers were thoroughly annoyed with how close I was standing to the basement door. I had never come across a secret door before, but I was new to the business at the time. I quickly grew out of my excitement for secret doors after that. After the piano was out of the way, I dashed down the stairs. To my surprise, the door did have a knob. It was just low enough to be hidden behind the piano. The effect made the door look taller than it actually was, and I had to wonder who would make a door like that. The knob was low enough to be at a 3-year-old's height. To be fair, the woman was in a wheelchair, but this was the only door like that, and it was hidden behind a piano so heavy that 2 average women couldn't move it, much less a frail 90-year-old who couldn't walk. I tried the knob, and it turned. I was half expecting the door to be locked. I pushed open the door slowly and could hear things shifting behind it. Perhaps something had fallen against the door. When the room was fully opened, I fumbled around for a light switch. After a few tries, I found one and flicked it. A yellowish light filled the room, and my mouth involuntarily fell open at what I saw. There were dolls. Rows and rows of dolls. There weren't any shelves in the room. Instead, every inch of the floor was covered in dolls. There were some dolls nailed to the wall. Not neatly, mind you, but by random parts of their body. Some were hanging limply by their hands, some by their feet, others were slumped over with a nail in their belly. There were dolls of all kinds: porcelain dolls, cloth dolls, plastic dolls, wooden dolls, big dolls, small dolls, old dolls, new dolls. Everything from a dollar store Barbie ripoff to an elegant, hand-painted masterpiece that was probably worth thousands of dollars. One of the things I first noticed after the shock of seeing the dolls was that the room smelled weird. Or, rather, it was the absence of a smell that weirded me out. You know how when you go into the back of an old closet, or an attic, or a building that hasn't been visited for a while, you get this old, musty smell? I didn't get that when I opened the door to that room. It smelled just like the rest of the house. There wasn't a window or any way for there to be a draft, either. It was like the room had been used frequently. There was no way the woman who owned the house could have gone in and out of the room, not with a whole-ass grand piano in the way. Her daughter took care of her, but when we discussed the house with the daughter, she looked pretty average. I don't know, maybe she was a secret bodybuilder. I stepped into the room via the pathway I made by pushing open the door. I always hate it when people on those ghost hunting shows start freaking out about cold spots. Yeah, you're cold, it's an abandoned building in the middle of the night, but I swear to you, the room felt like a walk-in freezer. The hair on my arms immediately stood up. Looking behind the door confirmed my suspicion that dolls had been lined up in front of the entrance as well. The shuffling noise was just me pushing them out of the way. The only spot on the floor that didn't have dolls in it was a small circle in the center of the room, just big enough to stand in if you pressed the insides of your feet together. Every single doll in the room was facing that circle. I could feel myself wanting to get out of the situation, but there were so many dolls in there that could actually be worth something. I remembered Sammy's warning about some things needing to stay in the house, but pushed the thought away. Like I said, I was new. I began to gather the dolls, separating them by type. I had just finished making a spot for a few porcelain dolls I had gathered when I heard a soft thud behind me, like if someone had thrown a towel on the ground. I paused for a moment, my heart racing. Even though I was determined to do my job, I was still freaking the fuck out. I turned slowly, barely daring to breathe. I stood from my crouched position, and directed my eyes to the circle in the center of the room. There was a lumpy, cloth doll with a face crudely drawn on it in the center of the circle. It looked like something a child would make. Determined not to let the room get to me, I picked up the doll. It felt like it was filled with some sort of uncooked rice or beans. There was a loose strip of duct tape attached to its right arm. I glanced up, and saw that the doll had been taped by its arms and legs to the ceiling above the circle. The other 3 flaps of tape were hanging loosely from the ceiling. I laughed to myself. The tape had just failed, and the doll had fallen. Nothing unusual about it. Well, besides the obvious. I was about to return to my work when I heard the sound of 1,000 beads falling to the hardwood floor. I glanced down and saw that the doll was completely limp in my hands. It was nothing but an empty, humanoid-shaped bag. It had been filled with rice, and the rice had fallen from the doll all at once. A seam on the side of the doll had split all the way down while I was doing nothing but holding it. I dropped the doll and immediately left the room. Too many weird things were happening. It was one of those instances where each event wouldn't freak me out on its own, but they happened in quick succession, almost all at once. I decided that if I was in a horror movie, I would have screamed at myself to get out already, and shut the door firmly behind me. When I went back upstairs, Sammy asked if I had found anything. "Some things just need to stay in the house," I said. Sammy nodded, and we never spoke of the room again. As far as I know, she never went in there. Another time, the family of the deceased had mentioned that there might be some items in the attic. This was right after the doll room incident, so I was wary of any space that wasn't part of the normal living area of a house. Still, Sammy had given me the task of going through the attic items while she priced stuff in the kitchen, so I went into the garage, pulled open the trapdoor, and climbed up the ladder. The attic smelled like what I expected the doll room to smell like, musty and old. Nobody had been up there for years. I turned on my flashlight and started shuffling through the boxes of forgotten items, broken souvenirs, a rusty children's wagon, puzzle boxes without the puzzles. Just odds and ends that wouldn't belong anywhere but an attic. I had cleared out a box and designated it as my garbage can when I noticed a metal ring sticking out from underneath a box full of Beanie Babies. Curious, I pushed the box aside. I would have needed to move it anyway. The Beanie Babies were salvageable, and revealed another trapdoor, this one considerably smaller than the one I used to climb in. It looked just big enough for a small child. I opened the door and was met with darkness. I shone my flashlight into the opening. There was a deep hole. The sides looked like they could be part of the walls of a house at the beginning, with wooden insulation, but after that, the hole turned to stone, then nothing. I couldn't see the bottom. I grabbed a rusty screw that was lying around and tossed it in the hole, counting 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. I decided to stop at 30 Mississippis. I found Sammy in the kitchen, sorting silverware. "Does this house have a basement?" I asked. "No, why?" "Just wondering. Did you get to the back of the attic yet? 'Cause I was told that there might be some." "Not yet, Sam," I called, racing away from the impending long, drawn-out conversation. I returned to the attic, ready to investigate that hole some more, when I saw that the trapdoor was closed. I knew I had left it open. I tried pulling it open again, but the door was either stuck or locked. I decided that was where the garbage box was going to go, and quickly filled it with heavy tools that had rusted past the point of no return. I never talked to Sammy about the hole, and I never got the chance to open the trapdoor again. Not that I wanted to.